Welcome back to our channel, everyone. I think we've all dreamed of a peaceful life at some point. A lush green farm, a kitchen smelling of coconut milk, and the sound of a child's laughter. But life isn't always a calm lake. Today we're following little Ly and her mother Diep, simple, hardworking farmers, on a journey where the line between peace and peril is only a breath away. Believe it or not, in less than 5 minutes, a peaceful paradise can turn into a living nightmare. Diep slips. Her scream is swallowed by the roar of the murky red floodwaters rushing toward them. Above her is a sheer cliff. Below is a deadly current. And strapped to her back, her little girl is screaming in terror. Just as Diep's chest tightens in pure despair, a rough, calloused hand, the hand of a construction worker, reaches out and grabs her wrist. Veins bulging, breath heavy, and an iron will shining in a father's eyes. Can a small family once known for the sweet scent of cassava cake survive the wrath of the great wilderness? Today, I'm going to tell you a story that isn't just about the scent of coconut milk. It's about blood tears and the extraordinary power of family. If this story touches your heart, please hit the like button to spread the message. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. The morning sun was in no rush. It crept through the curtains, danced across the wooden floor, and finally came to rest on Ly's rosy cheeks. In her little crib, the toddler began her wake-up ritual, kicking her tiny legs, waving her arms in the air, and sporting 2 messy pigtails that had shifted to the side of her head like little beetle wings. Standing by the misty window, Diep watched her little angel in silence. She wiped her hands on her well-worn apron and leaned down with a smile as warm as the sunlight. "Good morning, my little farmer. You're finally awake." Diep scooped Ly up. The scent of warm milk mixed with the fresh morning air on the toddler's skin made her heart feel full. She kissed her daughter's cheek, soaking in the clumsy hug from those tiny arms. For a moment, Diep's mind drifted to James. He had driven his white truck out of the driveway at dawn when the fog was still thick to make it to the construction site on time. She whispered into Ly's ear as if sharing a secret. "Today, it's just us girls in our little kingdom." The small kitchen was soon filled with the rich aroma of pumpkin. Diep settled Ly into her high chair, where the food war began. A bowl of smooth, warm, golden pumpkin puree was placed in front of her. But for Ly, eating wasn't just about nutrition, it was a performance. One spoonful went into her mouth, the next got lost on her nose, and the rest ended up on her teddy bear bib. Every time Diep moved the spoon closer, Ly would drum her plastic spoon against the tray, like a little musician letting out giggles that echoed through the house. "You're noisier than the lead rooster." Diep laughed, wiping a smudge of pumpkin off the girl's cheek. "Hurry up and eat, sweetie. The garden is full of secrets waiting for us to find them." As the back door opened, a gust of crisp air, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild grass, filled their lungs. The flower beds that James had helped her till and plant were just waking up, the dew on the petals glistening like tiny diamonds. Diep handed Ly her most important weapon, a small green plastic watering can. Diep took the large one, and their journey began. They walked along the colorful rows of flowers, While Mom focused on carefully watering the roots, the little farmer had a philosophy of her own. Ly tilted her can, but instead of the flowers, she aimed straight for her own cloth shoes. Water splashed everywhere, soaking her tiny feet. Every time the water hit, Ly squealed with joy, her eyes squinting into happy slits. Ly, the flowers are in the ground. They don't grow on your toes. Diep teased their laughter, blending with the birdsong in the trees. Their last stop was the chicken coop at the back of the garden. The moment they heard the pitter-patter of tiny shoes, the hens started a ruckus. They rushed to the fence necks outstretched and wings flapping in a noisy cluck-cluck chorus. Diep poured a handful of golden corn into the feeder. Ly was so excited, she started jumping up and down, clapping her hands. Seeing a plump speckled hen come close to peck at a grain near her feet, Ly reached out her tiny hand to grab its shiny feathers. Diep quickly but gently caught her hand. She knelt down to eye level with her daughter, her voice soft and nurturing. Gentle sweetheart, the chickens feel pain too. They don't like having their feathers pulled. Let's let them eat in peace. Ly stopped tilting her head to look at her mom and then at the chicken. It seemed as though, in that innocent soul, a connection with nature was beginning to form. Under the shade of the old tree, in the warmth of the day, the sun was beautiful, and their world just drifted along, simple, quiet, but sparkling with those nameless little moments of happiness. As the sun climbed higher, shedding the last of the morning mist, the sky opened up into a clear crystal blue. James and the rumble of his white truck were long gone, leaving the two of them in a peaceful silence broken only by the rustle of the wind through the leaves. Diep took off her apron and changed into worn but sturdy work clothes. She skillfully tucked Ly into a fabric carrier on her back, pulling the knots tight to make sure her little girl was safe and snug in her mother's embrace. Ly seemed to understand the journey ahead. She didn't fuss at all, simply resting her chubby chin on her mom's shoulder. Her steady breath against Diep's neck felt warm and trusting. "Let's go, baby girl. Today we're going treasure hunting." Diep cheered softly, her voice full of excitement. They made their way slowly up the trail, leading to the cassava field. With every step, Diep's feet sank slightly into the smooth red basalt soil. Along the way, she made sure to point out wild blossoms or a chameleon camouflaged against a rotting log. In their eyes, the world was small, yet overflowing with wonders. Once they reached the field, Diep picked a massive tree with the thickest canopy to serve as base camp. She spread out a straw mat that smelled of the sun in the cool shade, setting Ly down with her favorite toys and a small water bottle. "You stay here and guard the camp, okay? If you wander off, I'm telling the chickens back home they'll come up here and demand their corn back." Diep teased with a wink. Ly burst into giggles, patting the mat with her tiny hands as if giving her word. Diep got to work. She grabbed her sharpened hoe, took a deep breath, and struck the first blow into the earth. The loose red soil gave way, revealing clusters of firm white cassava roots that looked like the earth's tiny arms reaching up. As the sun grew hotter, beads of sweat gathered on her forehead and rolled down her cheeks, and red dirt found its way under her fingernails. But the exhaustion seemed to vanish every time she looked up and saw Ly lost in her own little world on the mat. Diep chatted away as she worked. "Ly, the cassava is so good this year. If we sell enough, Mommy will buy you a beautiful red bow for those pigtails, okay? By late morning, small piles of cassava were lined up across the field like little trophies. Diep loaded them into a basket and strapped it across her forehead, the gritty, resilient stance of a Highland woman. Carrying both her daughter and the harvest, she stepped firmly toward the distant sound of rushing water. The creek appeared wild and beautiful, with water so clear you could see the multicolored pebbles at the bottom. Diep sat knee on a large, flat, cool rock. Stay right here and watch Mommy work her magic. This stream is for washing cassava, not your bathtub. Ly gleefully kicked her feet over the water, occasionally dipping a toe in to make the water splash, sparkling like silver in the sunlight. Diep knelt by the bank, her hands moving fast as she submerged the roots in the cool water. She used a dried loofah to scrub away the brown skin, revealing the pure, snowy white flesh underneath. The babbling water, the clinking of the roots, and Ly's laughter created a sweet symphony in the heart of the wild. Back at home, as the shadows shortened under their feet, Diep started on the most important part. She sat by the doorstep, expertly peeling the cassava. The clean chunks were tossed into a large cast iron pot over a crackling wood fire. Kitchen smoke began to drift through the roof, carrying the rich scent of dry wood and the warmth of togetherness. Once the cassava was fork tender and fragrant, Diep pulled it out and placed it into a large wooden mortar. Now watch Mommy perform a magic trick. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the pestle echoed through the room. Under Diep's skillful hands and strength, the crumbly cassava transformed into a smooth, tacky dough. She sprinkled in some golden sugar and poured over a stream of rich, creamy white coconut milk. Diep used her bare hands to knead the dough with pure devotion. The aroma of cassava mixed with the richness of coconut and the sweetness of sugar filled every corner of the tiny kitchen. Ly stood there, gripping the edge of the table, her eyes wide as she followed her mom's every move, her little nose twitching with hunger. In that warm kitchen, there wasn't just the smell of food. There was the scent of happiness of hard work and the boundless love Diep had for her family. She looked at her daughter and smiled. Almost time to eat, my little farmer. As the sun began to tilt toward the west, casting long shadows across the porch, Diep started the charcoal grill. The coals caught fire, glowing bright red and popping like tiny rounds of applause. She expertly shaped the dough into round, flat cakes as pretty as crescent moons. The second they hit the grill, the aroma exploded. It was intoxicating, the earthy scent of fresh dug cassava, the sweetness of brown sugar, and especially the rich, heavy fragrance of coconut milk bubbling on the surface of the cakes. The outer crust, the crust started turning a gorgeous golden brown, with just enough char around the edges to give it a light crunch, while the inside stayed soft, chewy, and smooth. Ly couldn't sit still on the mat anymore. Our little boss was standing right by the stove, gripping her mom's shirt, hem with both hands, and standing on her tiptoes as high as she could. She took deep breaths of the delicious scent, her eyes following every flip of the spatula. But she didn't dare touch anything. She'd already learned her lesson about the heat of the fire. All right, I'd like to invite the boss to try the first sample. Deep blew on a small piece of the cake, waiting for the steam to settle before bringing it to Nee's lips. The moment it hit her tongue, Nee's eyes went wide with wonder before melting into pure satisfaction. She chewed happily, her little mouth moving like a tiny bunny's. Deep let out a big laugh that echoed through the kitchen. Approved, it's perfect. Now Mom can confidently go sell these and get that bow for your hair. Deep started the final preparations. She laid out vibrant green banana leaves, still smelling of that fresh, earthy sap on a bamboo tray. The golden cakes were stacked in neat, even layers, looking as beautiful as a piece of folk art. Getting to town was a real workout. Deep balanced the tray on her head, a perfect display of balance she'd mastered over the years. She kept one hand steady on the edge of the tray and tucked Knee against her hip with the other. The two of them were a walking symbol of hard work and grit as they made their way toward the district market. The village road felt extra lively that afternoon. Neighbors sweeping their yards or watering plants paused when they saw them. Going to the market today, Diep? Mrs. Nam called out from the end of the alley. Yes, ma'am. Fresh cassava cakes from our garden, just finished them at noon. They smell amazing. Stop by the market and support us later. Deep called back, her voice bright and full of energy. Every hello brought a smile to Deep's face. Even the harsh afternoon sun felt a little kinder thanks to the warmth of the neighborhood. The district market wasn't huge, but it was always buzzing with chatter and a mix of smells. Deep picked her usual spot under the shade of an old almond tree. The moment the tray touched the ground, the irresistible scent of toasted coconut milk stole the attention of everyone nearby. The pair was like a breath of fresh air on a muggy afternoon. An elderly woman doing her early shopping stopped by, opening her basket. Give me 6 for my grandkids, dear. I can't resist that smell. Here you go, ma'am. They're still nice and hot. Right after her, a delivery driver pulled over, drenched in sweat. He polished off 2 cakes in one go, nodding in approval. A group of students just getting out of school, their white uniforms fluttering, huddled around Diep's tray, chatting away as they ate. But Nee was the real star of the show, sitting on a tiny stool next to her mom. Whenever someone bought a cake or even just glanced her way, she'd tilt her head and give a little wave with her tiny hand. Is this your daughter? She's adorable, helping her mom at such a young age, one woman remarked. Deep looked at her daughter, her eyes sparkling with pride. Yes, she's mine. She was up at the farm this morning and supervised the baking all afternoon. The sounds of chatter blended into the late afternoon market buzz. The tray emptied out as the hours ticked by. As the sun began to set, Deep felt a strange sense of warmth. She wasn't just selling cakes. She was planting the first seeds in her daughter's heart about the value of hard work, pride, and human kindness. When James got home tonight, she'd tell him all about their big work day and show him the red bow she bought for Nye with her first bit of profit. By the time the last rays of sun were nothing but a thin red thread on the horizon, Deep's tray was completely empty. She lightly brushed the last few crumbs off the green banana leaves, her heart feeling light, like she'd just set down a beautiful sweet burden. Deep sat down on a low wooden stool, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion, but her eyes were glowing with joy. She pulled out an old floral fabric pouch and carefully smoothed out each bill money that smelled of sweat, toasted cassava, and kindness. We did it. Not a single one left. We're all sold out, baby. Ly, who had started to nod off after her long work day, suddenly perked up at her mom's cheer. She clapped her tiny hands together, babbling as if she were sharing the pride of her very first sales record. The walk home at dusk was hauntingly beautiful. Crickets began to chirp in the grass, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine wafted through the cool breeze. When the silhouette of their little house appeared behind the trees, Diep saw a familiar glow. James's white truck was already parked under the old tree. James climbed out of the cab, his orange high-vis gear covered in cement dust and grease from the construction site. His face showed the deep fatigue of a high-intensity shift. But the moment his eyes landed on his wife and daughter, the exhaustion seemed to evaporate. A brilliant smile lit up his rugged face. He strode over quickly, taking the heavy bamboo tray from his wife's hands before scooping Ly up high. "Hey there, Daddy's little princess. Were you a good girl today?" James planted a loud, exaggerated kiss on Ly's chubby cheek, the warmth of his stubble making her giggle uncontrollably. Watching them, Diep felt every ounce of exhaustion from a long day of carrying cassava and pounding dough simply melt away. The small kitchen flared to life again. But this time, it wasn't the heat of the griddle. It was the warm glow of a family dinner. The meal was simple: a plate of bright green veggies picked from the garden, a pungent bowl of garlic chili fish sauce, and a plate of caramelized pork that smelled heavenly. Amidst the rhythmic clinking of chopsticks, Diep began to recount the day's journey. Her voice drifted between a whisper and an excited chatter as she replayed the day like a movie from Ly, watering her own shoes and the greedy chickens, to the heavy swings of the hoe and the magic of the mortar and pestle. James listened, his eyes never leaving his wife. He tucked a piece of pork into her bowl and said in a low, warm voice, "While I spent all day looking at dry concrete and cold steel, my wife and daughter were making the whole town fall in love with cassava cakes. I'm so proud of my two girls." His words made Diep flush like a teenager. She reached into her pocket and felt the floral pouch where the bright red bow she'd hurriedly bought at the end of the market sat waiting. She gently tied it into Ly's fine hair. Under the golden lamplight, the bow looked like a tiny butterfly perched on the little girl's head, a small trophy from her mother's hard work. Night finally pulled its curtain shut. The garden outside fell into a deep sleep, leaving only the rustle of leaves whispering to the wind. The charcoal in the hearth was now just a layer of fine gray ash, with only the occasional spark flickering before fading out. In the small, wood-scented room, 3 tired bodies lay close together. Ly was in the middle, her hand still tightly gripping her dad's thumb, her mouth twitching as if she were dreaming of a field made of cakes. Diep stared at the ceiling, feeling an incredible sense of peace. A simple day had ended, but it hadn't been meaningless. It had turned rough roots from under the earth into a delicious meal, into laughter at a market corner, and into priceless memories woven from love and diligence. Under this roof, happiness wasn't something far away. It was right there in and her daughter's steady breathing, her husband's calloused hands, and the lingering scent of cassava cakes. On Sunday morning, the sun woke up a little late, lazily, filtering soft rays through the leaves of the ancient tree behind the house. Unlike other days, James didn't head out at dawn for the construction site. Instead, he got up early to pack an old hiking bag with everything they needed for a family outing. A few blankets, a large water jug, and of course, the bags of cassava cakes Diep had prepped the night before. Ly seemed to sense that today was special. Instead of curling up in her crib, she was up early, her two little pigtails adorned with the bright red bow Mom had bought, looking like two butterflies resting on a cloud. "We're going on a picnic today," Diep announced as she wrapped a traditional scarf around Ly's neck. They didn't take the dusty trail to the farm. Instead, they chose a narrow path leading deep into the valley, where the sound of flowing water was part of the land's very breath. James led the way, taking long, steady strides with the backpack on his shoulders. Diep followed, holding Ly's hand and guiding her over the flatter parts of the trail. Every step Ly took on the soft grass was a new discovery. A bright red ladybug with tiny black spots crawling on a large leaf made her stop and hold her breath. "That's a ladybug going to work, Ly." James laughed, leaning down so his daughter could get a better look. Ly reached out a tiny finger to touch it, but then pulled back, remembering the "be gentle" lesson her mom taught her at the chicken coop. Standing nearby, Diep breathed in the deep scent of wild grass, damp earth, and the faint fragrance of forest flowers. No kitchen smoke, no construction dust, just the sound of footsteps crunching on dry leaves. After about 30 minutes of walking, the babbling of water grew louder, blending with the songs of nameless forest birds. The stream appeared like a silver ribbon draped over massive boulders, the water so clear you could see schools of tiny fish darting around the bottom. James picked a lush green patch of grass right next to a wide, flat rock. He spread out a checkered blanket, creating a cozy bed in the middle of nature. Diep took off Ly's cloth shoes, letting her bare feet touch the cool surface of the stone. The little girl squealed with delight as the chill spread up from her soles. "Water mommy fish." Ly pointed at the water shimmering under the sun. James waded into the stream, his strong calves submerged in the cool current. He searched for the smoothest, prettiest pebbles and placed them in Ly's palm. "Look, princess, these are the treasures of the stream." Ly took the stone, pressed it against her cheek, and looked at her mom with sparkling eyes. Diep sat on the bank, pulling out the cassava cakes. She reheated them over a small makeshift fire she built from dry twigs nearby. The aroma of toasted cassava once again mingled with the scent of the old forest, creating a flavor of peace that felt almost otherworldly. As the simple lunch was laid out, the whole family gathered on the blanket. They ate the cakes, snacked on sweet forest berries, and listened to the stories the stream had to tell. James talked about when he was a boy, how he used to sneak out to streams just like this to catch fish. Diep told about her plans for the garden, where she wanted to plant some rose bushes so Ly could water them every morning. Ly, exhausted from all the running and playing, finally started to wear out. She rested her head on her mom's lap, her eyes half closed as she watched the yellow leaves drift lazily down the stream. James rested his hand on Diep's shoulder, and the two of them sat in silence, looking out at the endless green of the forest. In that moment, it felt like time had stopped. There were no bills to pay, no worries about tomorrow. Just three hearts beating as one under the deep blue sky. "Thank you, both of you." James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I forget that the most precious things are right here in mornings like this." Diep smiled, taking her husband's rough hand in hers. "And thank you for being the strongest home for us to come back to." As the sunlight shifted into a rich golden honey hue, the family began to pack up. They left behind nothing but footprints and smiles. James hoisted a fast-asleep Ly onto his shoulders. Her red bow was slightly crooked, and her tiny hand was still clenched around a small pebble from the stream. Diep walked beside him, her hand brushing his arm. They headed back up the trail, leaving the stream behind to continue its eternal song of life and love. Sunday was drawing to a close, but the coolness of the water and the warmth of their bond would follow them into sleep and through the long work week ahead. Then the valley sky, once a clear blue, shifted violently. Dark, heavy clouds rolled in from behind the western peaks, swallowing the honey-colored light in a matter of minutes. The air turned muggy and thick, a terrifying warning sign of a high country summer storm. "Deep pack up, now the rain is coming." James snapped his voice tight with worry. He knew better than anyone how fierce the mountains could be when they lost their temper. They had barely shoved their gear into the backpack when a crack of lightning tore through the sky, echoing like the roar of a wild beast. The wind began to howl through the rocky crevices, snapping dry branches like matchsticks. The rain came down in a deluge, fat, heavy drops that pelted them like stones, cutting visibility down to just a few feet. The gentle stream they had enjoyed that morning was gone. Runoff from the peaks caused the water levels to surge instantly, turning the crystal-clear current into a murky, churning red torrent of mud and debris. "James, the old path is flooded," Diep screamed over the shrieking wind. The flat trail they had walked earlier had transformed into a deep, rushing trench of water. Startled by the thunder, Ly began to wail. Diep pulled her daughter tight against her chest, struggling to keep her footing on the slick, muddy ground. James quickly hoisted them both toward a higher rock ledge. His face went stone cold, his eyes burning with the fierce determination of a protector. "Hold on to me. We have to scramble up that slope to the ridge. We can't stay near the bank. The flash flood from upstream could hit any second. James gripped Diep's hand, using his other arm to press Ly against his chest, shielding her from the biting wind. They began the desperate climb up a steep, jagged cliffside to escape the deadly roar of the water rising below. The red basalt soil turned into a slick, greasy sludge the moment the rain hit it. Diep's foot slipped a sudden fall that nearly sent her over the edge into the abyss below. "James!" she screamed, her voice piercing the air. With a split-second reflex that seemed almost superhuman, James ditched the backpack full of food and roasted cassava to free his hands, catching Diep by the wrist just in time. The veins in his arms bulged under the strain, and his heavy-duty work boots finally proved their worth, anchoring him firmly against the roots of an ancient tree. "Hold on to me! Don't let go!" James roared through the rain, his voice drowning out the thunder. In that life or death second, Diep looked into her husband's eyes and saw no fear, only an iron will. Summoning every ounce of strength he had, he hauled her up from the edge of the cliff. Caught between them, Ly was terrified, but the moment she felt the warmth of her father's work gear, she went silent, her tiny arms wrapping around James's neck in a gesture of absolute trust. After nearly an hour of battling the steep slopes and the driving rain, they finally reached the hilltop, finding a small dry cave for shelter. The mountain storm passed as quickly as it had arrived. As the dark clouds began to break, the late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, creating shimmering beams of light in the mist rising from the ground. They collapsed onto the floor of the cave, gasping for air. James checked Diep and Ly over for any injuries. Seeing they were both safe, he finally let out a long breath of relief, leaning back against the rock wall, with sweat and rainwater streaming down his face. It was then that Ly opened her tiny fist. The little pebble from that morning, the treasure of the stream, was still there, clutched so tightly it had left an imprint on her palm. She held the stone out to James. "Daddy?" "Rock." James looked at the pebble, then at his wife, and finally at his resilient little girl. He let out a laugh, a soft, relieved chuckle full of pride. "That's right, baby. We kept the treasure." They made it back home after nightfall. James's white truck was still there, standing like a loyal soldier waiting to welcome them back. Diep lit the fire, not for baking cakes this time, but to warm her family. James sat by the doorstep, using a knife to smooth out the pebble before drilling a tiny hole through it. He looped a red thread through the stone, making a simple necklace for Ly. "This is a medal for the bravest little farmer in the world," he said as he placed it around her neck. That night, under their small roof, the sound of the rain outside was nothing more than background music for a peaceful sleep. They had lived through a day that wasn't just filled with sunshine and flowers, but with a violent storm. Yet it was that very storm that proved one thing: no matter how plain the food or how steep the road, as long as they hold on to each other, every field and every wild stream will always be a place of lasting happiness.